My name is Kevin Clouden. I am the director of the California Center here at the Milken Institute. And you wonder what the California Center does, what it means in connection to the world, in connection to global conference. And the answer is that we are here, not only in California, we're here in Los Angeles, technically half in LA, half in Beverly Hills, if you look at the geography of the hotel. And what you find is that we are the most diverse state in the country. We are the state of immigrants. We have historically been the state of immigrants. What's absolutely fascinating about California is that we are a state that truly thrives in the world. This is a state that was built by essentially taking what had been first the Spanish, then the Mexican landowning structures and many of its cultural structures, building it with immigrants who had come in both from within the United States and people who had come in from Europe. The fact that we brought in a large number of Chinese who significantly contributed not only to the infrastructure of this state, but also to its economy, particularly in the Bay Area. And all of that happened before 1900. As a matter of fact, right now, California as it stands has the highest percentage of foreign-born residents that we've had in the state since 1890. And what's amazing about that is that before 1890, we were higher. We were over 30% foreign-born. As a matter of fact, we approached nearly 40%. And the reason for that is that California has always been a place not only to put in a cliched term, a land of opportunity, but genuinely a place that thrives on bringing the best and the brightest here, and in turn, by connecting our economy to the world. What we were going to talk about today is how California's diversity, the fact that we are now the second a minority-majority state in the country, with Hawaii being the first one to go that path. What advantages that gives us? What advantages that gives us in terms of how we interact in the state, how we interact in the country, and how we interact with the world. Now, is to discuss exactly what is so significant about that, the fact that we have such an incredible diversity of ethnicities, an incredible diversity of talent. We have a wonderful panel assembled here today of people who truly not only reflect the talent in California, but also a deep, strong interest in California and how it is not only in terms of diversity, but how it connects with the country and the world. Starting on my far right is Senator Kevin De Leon, who is the next President Pro Tem of the California State Senate, and he is a man who represents not only diversity in the fact that he is a first-generation immigrant, but he is also a man of opportunity. He was the first to graduate in his family to graduate high school, let alone college, and he is a former U.S. citizenship teacher, which I think is absolutely fascinating and relevant. And he has been at the forefront of pushing for opportunities for workers, pushing for opportunities for residents of the state, and creating economic opportunities as a whole. Next to him is Sylvia Flores, who is, alas, only a second-generation immigrant. Who she is, in fact, she is the daughter of a Mexican immigrant, and more scandalously, a Texan. She graduated with a degree in chemical engineering, so we know she's smart. And she co-founded a first-of-its-kind incubator, in fact, with the involvement of former Mexican President Vicente Fox, to train Latino entrepreneurs, not just for California, but in fact for much of Latin America as well. Now, next to me is Julia Gao, who has the distinction of being a double immigrant. She is not only Indonesian by birth, but has a Chinese background as well, and has the ability to confuse me in multiple languages that I don't speak. And she also, I can qualify her as an immigrant to the extent that, heaven forbid, she came to the U.S. and went to the Midwest first. She went to the University of Illinois, but has come here and is now Chief Operating Officer and President of one of the largest banks in California, East West Bank, one of the 30 largest in the country, and a key bridge between California and Asia. And that is something that we will definitely be dwelling on. Now, Joe Green. Joe is our native. He in fact has to go back to his great-grandparents for immigrants. He is a genuine native Californian, but that being said, he is founder and president of forward.us, which is in fact created to lobby for comprehensive immigration reform, improvements to education, and investment in technological breakthroughs with benefits to the masses. So if there's somebody who is going to be passionate and connected in terms of why California needs talented people in the state and its connections to the world, he's it. Now, last but most assuredly not least, is our other first-generation immigrant, Deep Nishar, who I'm sure I'm killing your name again. But like Julia, Deep also migrated from Asia to the University of Illinois. So I see a pattern here. We now have two people who went there at the University of Illinois. But Illinois' losses are a gain. Like Joe, he also spent time at Harvard. But he's now Senior Vice President of Products and User Experience at LinkedIn, which, needless to say, is a company that not only innovates, but provides ongoing connections between us and the rest of the world. And in addition, he was formerly head of Asia Pacific for Google and founded Patkai Networks. And he has also been instrumental in helping to fund immigrant entrepreneurs and create opportunities in Silicon Valley. So to talk today, what I'd like to do is we're going to be asking some key questions and having some discussion on many different aspects of what that demographic edge is and how do we maintain it and keep it. First off, I'd like to go to my far right to Kevin and ask, is that California, being the second minority-majority state in the U.S., how does it change how the world views the state, and how should it?
Well, first, I want to say thank you, Kevin, for the invitation, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with each and every one of you. As you know, for us in California, for those who are not Californians, diversity is very critical, and it's essential for a state like California, for our economic security. The diversity here is quite amazing, and I'm going to put this in context for each and every one of you. I represent a district just maybe perhaps 15 miles east of us, and I would qualify it as the most diverse district, not in the nation, but on planet Earth. And when I say that, I have about 1 million. I have 1 million constituents, so a Senate seat in California is larger than a congressional seat in Washington, D.C. And out of the 1 million constituents that I have all of Koreatown, I have all of Chinatown, I have Little Tokyo, I have Filipino Town, I have Thai Town, I have Little Armenia, I have Little Bangladeshi, and I have the largest concentration of Mexicans outside of the Republic of Mexico, and I have the largest concentration of Central Americans, specifically Guatemalans and Salvadorians outside of Central America, all geographically located within my senatorial district. And it's an amazing mosaic. It's a beautiful tapestry of different ethnicities and cultures, and that's the strength of my district, and therefore it's the strength of the state of California. We just witnessed just recently, a few weeks ago, the Winter Olympics in Sochi, Russia. And to put this again in context, the GDP of California is larger than that of all Russia. We have the 9th largest GDP in the entire world, Russia, and obviously we've seen a lot in the news lately with Putin and Ukraine and Crimea and all the drama taking place over there. But when you put that in context, our GDP in California, with the changing demographics, which are very profound, the seismic changes taking place right now, we're the 9th largest GDP in the entire world. We have Italy ahead of us, and I think I feel confidently that we'll overtake Italy soon. Then there's the UK. I don't know if we'll get there, eventually, but we were there at one time when we were the 5th largest GDP in the world. So diversity and the changing demographics and how we embrace the different ethnicities, how we accept the different ethnicities, and how we celebrate the different ethnicities is very critical for California, because it's about the economic security of the state of California.
Absolutely. And I think that leads in very well to the next question I want to ask Deep, which is that with our diversity in human capital, it allows companies based here to collect people from many backgrounds. How does that give us an advantage?
So I'm an engineer by background, right? That's what I studied at Illinois, and before that, so I'll start with some numbers. And the numbers speak volumes. There's a study done by the University of California at Berkeley, and what they found was between 95 and 2005, over 50% of all technology companies that were created in the state of California, and over 25% of all technology companies created in the United States were created where at least one of the founders was an immigrant. Not to stop there, these companies in that decade created $52 billion in revenue and 450,000 jobs. Sounds like pretty good right now, doesn't it?
Sounds very
450,000 jobs, that's a lot. I think that's what we see. We see the amalgamation that this diversity brings into our companies, the creativity, the innovativeness, and a fostering of ideas where it's not about what ethnicity, what color of skin you are, but it's the power of your ideas, and it's a true meritocracy, at least in Silicon Valley, that we see. And I think that proliferates throughout the state of California, and that creates the richness and the fact that we then become the top 10 in the world in terms of GDP. That's, I think, a direct outcome of our embrace of the diversity of our population.
That being said, Julia, the thing I would actually ask you, because it ties in very well off of that, is that how does the state's incredible diversity make it more appealing to foreign companies?
The diversity in California and also the size of the market makes it very appealing, for foreign companies or individuals to invest and to come to California. California is a gateway to the Pacific Rim. So for Asian investors, California is the #1 choice. When it comes to real estate, for sure. Most of the people from China, once they acquire wealth, many of them wanted to send their kids to school in the United States, which means that a lot of time they want to buy homes, so that the kids, can stay here and go to school here. What is interesting is that San Gabriel Valley is the most popular place for the Chinese to buy homes and to send the kids here because of the ecosystem, makes it very comfortable. There are plenty of Chinese restaurants, all the things that you don't even have to speak English if you don't want to, for the parents who don't speak English. So San Marino, Arcadia, the home prices never went down during the crisis because as soon as it, the real estate, had a downturn, there are plenty of buyers from China that come to buy the homes here. Actually, Arcadia now is 35% higher in terms of the home prices compared to the peak before the financial crisis. And many of them, they come here and they pay cash, so they don't have to worry about, if, it's difficult to get mortgage loans. So when it comes to real estate, California is a magnet, for investments. And I would say too that diversity, brings, many of the foreign companies to set up their U.S. affiliates, U.S. subsidiaries in California. We are successful in getting BYD, to be headquartered in Los Angeles. However, I do think that, California, needs to improve the competitiveness compared to other states because as the operations got bigger and bigger because of the high taxes, high labor costs, as well as a very strict, labor laws in California that, as you heard, Toyota is relocating to Texas and bring 3,000 high-paying jobs. So I think that for California to continue, it can attract, the first, entrance to the United States because of the diversity, because of the comfort level of foreign companies, to send the people to start here. But, as they got, larger in operations, I would be concerned if we cannot retain, as a state, that we cannot retain those companies, in California. And East West Bank, we, as Kevin mentioned, we are the bridge between U.S. and Asia and China in particular. So we have been helping many of the companies from China or individuals to come over here to be acclimated and to be connected with the local business partners and connections locally here. So, to some degree, we have been helping those people to, to get situated in California.
Well, what that brings up actually is, Joe, is that you had mentioned when we were talking beforehand the fact that the world is globalizing, and we're in a situation right now where we have to be able to compete with that. We're in a digital age, information gets sent all over the place. What is our greatest asset here in California, and what can we do about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and thanks for having me. I think that, we often forget that the idea that people can become American, that our identity is something that's not about, who your 10th generation ancestor was, right? None of us were here, but it's simply about living in a place and subscribing to a set of ideas. And I think that, two main things are happening to the world economy, especially the developed world economy. We are globalizing, and it's becoming a more knowledge-based economy. And I always think about one of the predictions that was dead wrong. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, we were all hearing that we were all going to be telecommuting from our pajamas in Costa Rica by now. Instead, companies want all of their employees in one place. Facebook is building, Frank Gehry is designing the world's largest office room, one enormous room, so you can have up to 10, I think it's like 10,000 engineers in one single room. So if you want a single physical location that serves the entire world market, and you need a diversity of talent to actually understand Brazil and Russia and China, the only way to do that is with immigration. So our ability as a country in California, within the country, to be a place that people from around the world feel at home and feel welcomed is our #1 asset. And in a 21st century economy, it's like, how is America going to remain the world's economic power? It is because we are the place that everybody wants to come.
And that's one of the keys, is that we need California in particular to be the place that people still want to come. And we can also talk a little about the fact that they can still afford, especially when Arcadia is going up to impossible heights, let alone Silicon Beach and various other areas. Now, Sylvia, being somebody who is very clearly based in California and trying to encourage others based in California, as well as occasional others who are wandering off in other parts of the country, other areas, how does being based in California help your company and others like it?
Well, I just want to tell you, I'm very honored to be here today. First of all, being in Silicon Valley, we have the best VCs and angels. We have the best resources as far as capital. We have an enormous network of the brightest, talented engineers in the world that come to Silicon Valley and make their dreams possible. So we have entrepreneurs from Mexico, from all over Latin America, from Spain, even from Cuba, who are contacting us and want to come to Silicon Valley and think globally. And California is the place to come.
So then, that being said, is that when you were shaping your company, if you want to just take a second just to talk about what you do, how do you essentially harness what is in California as part of what your company does?
Well, first of all, what we try to do is we're an accelerator. I don't know if you could see the slides up there, but if you could go...
have to call it up by number.
Okay, number 9. Slide number 9. So, okay, so in our accelerator, we get talent from all over Latin America and Mexico and the US. And the way we harness them to be connected is we use social media, we use Google Hangout, we use Skype, and we continue having that relationship with them. So they can stay connected with us and they know what's going on in Silicon Valley.
Yes, but the question then comes in, is do you use LinkedIn and Facebook as well? So,
yes, of course.
That makes sense. So now, Deep, if you're dealing with a situation where you want to utilize immigrant entrepreneurs who are overseas, and you want to tie in they've come, both the ones who have started here and gone elsewhere, as well as ones who have come here from overseas. How do you tie them into an ecosystem here in California, and how do we get a broader benefit from that?
So there are several ecosystems, and one of the things that perhaps will come a little bit later is, as a state, I think California really values immigration and immigrants and the diversity that we bring in. I think as a nation, as a country, we have a long ways to go. And that disconnect, because our needs are local, but the law is federal. It's something Joe deals with every day in his work. And that white elephant needs to be tackled at some level. So, my personal story is I've now lived in this country more than half my life, 24 years. For the first 18 years, I could have been kicked out of this country at whim by anybody for something as minor as a traffic accident, because I was not a US citizen. In fact, I went through every alphabet soup of visas that you can imagine. I came here on an F1 student visa. After that, in order to work for a very short period of time, I was given something called the EAD. After that, my company had to sponsor me for an H-1B. After 5 or 6 years of H-1B, it changed into a I-485 that then became a I-140. Then I became a resident alien. So, science fiction fans, I've been an alien once in my life, according to the Immigration and Naturalization Service.
Yeah, so, we hope you live long and prosper. So.
And then eventually, I filed my N-400 to become a US naturalized citizen in 1998, 18 years into my journey here. During those 18 years, I have degrees and I worked at some of the best companies here. I started my own company. I generated jobs. I paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes, and all of them could have vanished like that just because I had a minor traffic infraction somewhere.
Right.
And that is not a very hospitable environment. Okay.
If I can say, one of the things that's been really interesting working on this issue, and Forward.us is funded by a number of the leaders in the tech community, including Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, and Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates, and many folks. And one of the things that's been interesting for me is we've done a lot of events bringing together undocumented immigrants and immigrants like Deep, who came here through the legal process. And one of the things you find is actually how much in common there is to the degree of uncertainty and, frankly, just the degree of kind of disrespect that the system, instead of saying, hey, thanks for wanting to come here and contribute to our society, we're saying, well, actually, no, and by the way, if you do any of these things, we're going to kick you out. There's this precariousness, this inability to plan your life. I mean, if you're in an H-1B currently, your spouse is not allowed to work. If you lose your job, you have, I think, 60 days to leave the country. It doesn't embrace what's great about our heritage. And I think that actually our values as a country, I think in many places besides California as well, are very pro-immigration and very welcoming. And our laws just don't reflect those values.
Kevin?
Yes.
I want to add something to this because I totally recognize what Joe says, and I respect and agree with Joe. And Deep's long journey from, I'm going to start with the H-1B visa to the I-40 to the I-130, which was legal permanent residency, eventually to N-400, which is naturalization. Now a U.S. citizen, you have every right under the Constitution of the United States except the right to run for the presidency of the United States.
See, I'm still not equal.
And what's amazing is that, as a Californian, as a very proud Californian, as a cheerleader like all of us of California, there is a contradictory with California as well, too. We were home to Proposition 187, which was the most vile ballot initiative in the history of this country, And the Chinese Exclusion Act, obviously, it was a federal law in the Congress. The U.S. senator who promoted the Chinese Exclusion Act was a California U.S. senator. In fact, it was a bill that was promoted and authored and passed and codified into law in Sacramento in the California State Legislature. And then it became a federal law. This originated not in Alabama or Texas or Mississippi or Louisiana, but rather here in the state of California. So obviously California, we're not, the modern day Alabama, which I would qualify as being, I don't want to offend anyone who's an Arizonian, but I think Arizona is our modern day Alabama with regards to the pernicious and xenophobic policies that ultimately will hurt their economy if they go after people. But the one thing too is it's a reflection of the deep-rooted dysfunction and disconnection in Washington, D.C., and the Congress right now. Like Joe says, instead of embracing you, that you want to come to this country, you want to contribute, you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to access capital, whether you're someone from Bangalore who's securing an H-1B visa, or you're an immigrant from El Salvador fleeing, a civil war-torn country, and you just want to bring yourself up and give the best to your children. We have a backwards, severely dysfunctional, immigration policy, lack of creative thinking in Washington, D.C., that's going to ultimately hurt the economy of the United States.
And
it already is hurting us. So, just speaking again from the tech sector in Silicon Valley, we have 30,000 jobs right now that are unfilled. 30,000 jobs. We are not displacing anyone. We don't have those skills in this country, and we cannot fill them by bringing the best and the brightest to do what they need to do. Every single one of those jobs is going to create more opportunity. If we believe in a capitalistic society, which I did, which is why I came to this country in the first place, it's going to generate so much wealth and so much opportunity for everybody. And we should be training our citizens who are here already to fill those jobs. And meanwhile, we should be, not waiting until those jobs are filled, because guess what? Those jobs and those industries are being displaced. They are being created in Bangalore, in Beijing, in Guangzhou, in Berlin, in Kiev. I mean, modular what's happening there the last few months. I mean, Ukraine has been one of the hotbeds of Eastern Europe in terms of technology sector, in Czechoslovakia and Romania and Bulgaria, like you name it, lots of technology hotbeds are happening. And we cannot sit under this canopy of self-protectionism and saying, well, Silicon Valley is the best in technology and no one else can take our place. That's not true.
It's happening right now.
Yes. In some way, I was just saying, Julia, I was just going to go to you, is that one of the things, just to one perspective, is that California has been one of the great centers of H-1B visas, the working talent visas, as has been described. The funny thing is that we actually, after 9/11, have seen our share of H-1 visas go down. That other states have been more competitive in actually saying that we are going to target skilled immigrants to come in. And that's not even counting the EB-5, the entrepreneurial visas as well. And one of the things that really comes up is that we aren't maximizing even within the constraints that we're given right now, let alone what's going on in Washington that's slowing us down further.
I totally agree, with what Kevin and Dib were saying. We should really capitalize on the foreign students that went to colleges here in the United States and allow them to stay. We should look at Canada. Canada has a better model. If you graduated from, Canadian universities and you got a job, in 1 year, you can apply for a green card and you will get your green card in 6 months, 9 months, and those people will become Canadian citizens and contribute to the economy over there. We can really, look at that model and allow, anybody who went to, colleges here, especially if they are, have, masters or PhD in technology, engineering, or some, fields that we desperately need. We really should allow them, to stay and contribute to our economy.
Sylvia?
Yeah, I just want to say a comment about the demographics in California. We just passed, we're about 49% in the Latino community in this country, in the state. It's very, very important that we invest in our youth. And because we're going to have a major crisis here if they don't get into technology, they're going to be the future of California. We're going to lose the competitive edge. That's my perspective. That's why Manos Accelerator is very important. We drive to promote entrepreneurship and to give these young people inspiration to start their own companies, to go to college, go even start learning how to code. We need those skills in the state in order to be competitive. And to me, that's very, very close to my heart. That what we're doing in Silicon Valley and to really encourage the Latino youth.
Now, Kevin, one of the things that's going on is that there was a statistic that just went out that I saw in the LA Times that was just published today, saying that the good news is that our high school graduation rate is now the highest it's been in years. We're over 80%. But at the same time, the Latino graduation rate is about 63%. What kind of impact is that having, and what can we do about that?
I think that there's a couple things. And I agree with regards to H-1B visas and bringing folks from all over the world, whether from Guangzhou, China, whether from Bangalore, India, and elsewhere, that we have to have that pipeline because we have to have these entrepreneurs and folks can code who have that skill set already. That being said, we have to have some very serious investments in K through 12 and higher education in California because we run the real risk that if it's an immigration-focused exclusive policy, especially in the H-1B realm, that we're going to run the risk of having an economic apartheid system in the state of California, again, the 9th largest GDP in the entire world, because you have a sizable demographic right here that's growing in scope, but accessibility to higher education, whether it's the premier public university system in the world, not in the country, but in the world, the University of California, the Cal State system, the community colleges. The last 4 years, the last 5 years, because of the economic crisis, the economic recession, the worst one since the Great Depression, and because of the disproportionate impact that we had in California because of the derivatives that were packaged into the hedge funds dealing with subprime loans and the real estate market that fell right underneath ourselves, we cut roughly about $42 billion just in education. And that's not 42 million or 4.2 billion. We cut $42 billion just in K through 12 education as well as higher education. That's had a tremendous impact, and we're going to invest this year. Speaking with Governor Brown yesterday, we're going to invest. Our budget will be for K through 12 public education as well as community colleges, $61 billion. We're going to have $4 billion above and beyond what we had last year. We'll have about about $3 billion invested above and beyond last year in the University of California system. But trust me, I've had Janet Napolitano, I've had the former Homeland Security, now president of the UC system, as well as Tim White in my office, and they're grappling with Duke or Yale or Harvard or MIT grabs some hotshot constitutional UCLA lawyer, and the UCLA lawyer professor wants to stay here and he wants to teach in California. He doesn't want to go to Duke, but then they give him the package and then the housing costs, and he has no choice. He ends up going. So we have to really invest for short to mid to long-term investments in California in our education system. It is absolutely critical. And the last thing I want to say is that what Deep said is that I think Joe said this. We've gone into a knowledge economy. Mm-hmm. Therefore, we're in a cycle right now that if you have little or no education, globally, but especially in California, we have an economy that will punish you most severely. Because long gone is the day that you could work with brawn, you could work in a manufacturing plant that now exists in Guangzhou, China.
Are you pointing at yourself?
No, I'm sorry. No,
Joe, do you want to volunteer to be the brawn?
Yeah, or a plant in Mexico that's putting together, a Ford, Fusion, or some Chrysler car, a good union job, and that would suffice to pay a mortgage. And if it was a humble house, it was a humble house, but it was your house. Because we've gone to a knowledge economy that's been accelerated so quite dramatically. The haves and have-nots have that gulf has gotten much, much wider. So therefore, education is so key because we live in an economy now that will punish you very severely if you have little or no education.
I just want to make sure we also talk about the importance to the economy of creating a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. We have over 2 million undocumented immigrants here in California. Doing many of the hardest jobs, working the hardest. And I'm often asked, why do a bunch of technology industry leaders care about the issue of undocumented immigrants? And, I think there's two pieces. One is that you really cannot separate sort of, quote, high-skilled immigration from the issue of the undocumented. You have a lot of people with education, with amazing talents who are undocumented. You have 40% of the undocumented population are visa overstays, which means they came legally and then overstayed a visa. Those are often student visas, tourist visas, people who fall out of status. And the second thing I think is that, we as a community of entrepreneurs, I think it's important to keep in mind that what makes us an entrepreneurial nation is because we're an immigrant nation. And what you hear over and over, I'm sure, Deep, you've had this experience, when you talk to entrepreneurs and at Manos Accelerated, when you talk to entrepreneurs from other countries, and you ask, why do you want to come to America? One of the things they always say is, it's okay to fail. We have a culture that I think it's fair to say even embraces failure, embraces trying once, trying again. And I think that comes from being a country where people were willing to leave everything behind. Were willing to, I remember my grandfather talked about his parents, and were in a little village in Romania. They'd never been more than 3 miles from that village, and someday decided on the decision to get on a boat for a month to come to a country they'd never even seen a picture of. That's crazy. And that is risk-taking. And so we have this culture of taking risks. This is why immigrants are more likely to start businesses than native-born Americans. And so this is, I think, I always think it's just really important to remember that this is not two separate issues. It's not H-1Bs and high-skill immigration versus the undocumented. Together. This is one issue together, and and I think it's also important to remember most of our ancestors who came could not come today. Like, they weren't documented. They showed up at Ellis Island and wandered into the country. There was no such thing as being documented, and so I think that we need to keep that in mind. That for our economy, for California, we have to solve this whole issue.
When I was in high school, I had a teacher who was very proud of the fact that he had a Japanese immigrant grandfather who had come to the United States because he wanted the opportunity here. And it was a long time ago. He couldn't get into the U.S. at the time, so he took a ship to Mexico. And he then got to Mexico and bought a ticket on a train to Canada, and then hopped off in the middle of nowhere, and then proceeded to come and find a job and settled in, and because this is where he wanted to be. He could have been in Mexico, he could have been in Canada, but this was the opportunity. So now, one of the things that in particular that happens is it's not just that we have the immigrants who come and want to do business here, but we have a lot of foreign companies who really want to be in California. I mean, Julian mentioned BYD, which is a large Chinese company, admittedly with a stake owned by Warren Buffett, but still, the fact is they wanted to be in California. A lot of the Japanese companies, even though Toyota now feels like it can be somewhere else, or Nissan feels like it could be somewhere else, they started out wanting to be in California because they felt like if they were going to take a chance and they were going to be accepted, it would be here. Now, Julia, what do we do to actually overcome some of the barriers that are keeping some of these companies from expanding here? And furthermore, what do we do to try and facilitate some of the companies that are here that want to expand out overseas?
I think in terms of retaining companies in California, we really need to provide an environment that California is business friendly and very competitive in terms of the tax. I think the very high tax rate, for corporate and individual, many wealthy individuals, if they, retired, many of them left the state, and some of these are very successful entrepreneurs that could have contributed more, in California. So I do think that, tax is very important because most people, if they were, given a choice, go to Texas with no state tax versus California at, very high rate, it really is, a tough decision. Unlike California, East West Bank, we started in Los Angeles and we continue to stay in Los Angeles, and we now become global, not just in the United States, but we also have Greater China branches. But for us, it would take a lot to uproot the entire company to other state. However, for a foreign company with a U.S. affiliates or U.S. subsidiaries, they may not be as rooted in California. So we need to actually do even extra effort to make sure that they stay in California. Otherwise, we will be losing a lot of these high-paying jobs. I was, reading a book, one time, that how important it is for communities to bring, companies, especially technology, innovative companies that have high-paying jobs, because the multipliers to the local economy is 4 or 5 times versus retail or hospitality, where most of the workers are low-wage, workers. So it is important for California, to continue to retain, and obviously, we have an ecosystem, especially in the Silicon Valley, Silicon Beach, that allow these new, innovative technology, social media companies to prosper. However, in order to retain some foreign, companies that have grown in, the operations in the United States, we really should, try harder to retain those companies. And in terms of, helping, one of the greatest opportunity actually is for small middle market companies in California. And we actually have some, light manufacturing in the Inland Empire and, parts of California, that they have products that are of high demand by some other countries that they however for the small and middle market companies, they need help, for them to open the market, overseas, as well as knowing how to use, the Exim Bank guarantees or SBA guarantee for them to get financing. Because part of their challenge, for the smaller middle market businesses is that unlike Fortune 500, they don't have the kind of resources and connection. So they need, to get some assistance help, whether it's via trade, organization, trade offices, to open the market, for them, from overseas, and also for them to take advantage of, getting financing. Because when you get, Exim Bank guarantee, it's a lot easier for the bank, to finance the receivables. Otherwise, most banks would not take the foreign receivables as collateral.
So, and the Export-Import Bank is definitely tilted a bit more towards the larger companies. So,
however, actually a lot of technology companies, even the startups have been using that. So I think that's one thing that, maybe, some trade organizations or, I'm actually a member of the District Export Council of the Department of Commerce. That's, they are trying to help small middle market businesses to export. And part of the program is to get small middle market businesses to know all the facilities, all the programs available for them to help them to export.
Now, Deep, what kind of networks exist overseas that immigrant entrepreneurs aren't really utilizing? I mean, is that in terms of if they're trying to export, is there some sort of connection, do you think, that they could tap into?
I think a lot of them are probably based on ethnicity and regional. So amongst Indians, there's a network called the Indus Entrepreneurs, the Thai Forum, which started in Silicon Valley to enable immigrants who are coming here to be able to start companies and have these folks who are working as engineers have access to capital from others who had succeeded. So it was working almost like a co-op bank, if you will, right? That's how all communities start, as they probably did in New York with the Italians and others. I think the Chinese, I forget the name of the exact community that they have, but there's a similar forum in Silicon Valley. But then they have chapters around the world. So now, a lot of the folks in India, in Silicon Valley who are part of Thai, they are able to tap into these chapters all across India and do a lot of work there, whether it's for market access, tapping and setting up shop there because they can't find all the people that they need here, or other kinds of things like that. And I think there are similar kinds of things in China as well.
Now, just speaking of not finding the people they need
and then
here.
there's always LinkedIn.
Like oh, yes, well, you could say.
A commercial plug, like somewhere halfway through the conversation, I have to have that.
I was going to say, it's just that seemed like a natural somehow. So now, and to go even beyond that, now, Joe, one thing that has come up more than once, we've talked about the Canadians, that in some ways the Canadians seem to do things right in terms of luring people in a way that it seems kind of odd that the U.S. doesn't do more, particularly in California. But one of the things that you'd mentioned is that this phenomenon of these Canadian holding tanks. Now, what exactly is a holding tank, and why is it relevant to California?
So the Canadian immigration system is much more kind of configured around sort of job needs. And so every year on April 1st, the allocation of 65,000 H-1Bs, plus there's an extra 20,000 for people who graduate from U.S. universities, that allocation gets released. This year it was gone in about a week. And so so all these companies who they want to hire someone, whether that's from China or Mexico or Bulgaria or wherever, the next best thing is they get them a visa to come to Vancouver because they want to get them on Pacific Standard Time. And so there's all of these people and literally what they call holding tanks, which are these offices in Vancouver where they do work and people, but it's to get them on the same time zone and get them as close of a flight as humanly possible from Northern California. But this is a literal sort of instantiation of the economic loss because these people are consuming, creating jobs, creating economic activity in Vancouver that would instead be in California. And there was as a nice little sort of jab, if anyone saw this, if you, about a year ago, if you were driving on the 101 South from San Francisco to Silicon Valley, what you will see are billboards that are pretty much all recruiting billboards. Come work at this company, work at this company. And the government of Canada had put up a billboard with a big Canadian maple leaf that said, having H-1B problems? Come to Canada. And when Jan Napolitano was the Secretary of Homeland Security, she came and did an event with us, and I made sure that she saw that. And I tried calling that phone number. One ring, they pick up the phone, they're like, oh, you're a company, you want to come to Canada, how can we help? Wow. And that is the attitude that we should have, right? Which is the like, hey, you want to come here? Great. How do we make that happen? And I must admit, of part Canadian descent, so it's always nice to see that.
Well, there's your foreign national.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, just think about it. If Albert Einstein had missed that 1 week window this year, he would have to immigrate to Canada. We would not accept him in this country on an H-1B. I mean, that's the travesty, and it happens. We don't know the Albert Einsteins we are missing every year as a result of these kinds of things.
And not only that, but one of the things that's particularly true is, we're talking about our great education system, is that we fundamentally have one of the greatest concentrations of foreign students in the world in terms of educating people, not only who come and stay here, but also people who go back. I'd like to joke that if USA disappeared off the face of the earth along with its graduates, that Hong Kong and Taiwan wouldn't have any leaders. But it's not. I mean, it's more broad than that. But one of the things that's been happening that's actually is going on is that the UC system is becoming more dependent on foreign students in order to balance its budget. So how is that changing the character, do you think, in terms of the students, and what should we be doing to try and retain them, let alone helping our people locally?
Well, we have some of the best universities in the world, obviously. Cal, UCLA, Stanford, UCSD, with Khosla now, who's the new chancellor, Caltech. The UC system, because of the economic recession, because of the crisis, because of the draconian budgetary cuts, when you have to make decisions with regards to investment in human capital, or children who are on the spectrum of autism, or young teenagers who are homeless and have HIV and have no access to any type of medication, which is the ADAP program, you have to make life and death decisions. And it's not like you have a spreadsheet, if you will, and then you can balance the budget, erase a couple zeros, and here, we got it done. But when you erase a couple zeros, you accelerate the life expectancy of someone, or you probably condemn someone to death. So when you're in that space, it's very difficult. It's very stressful. The graduate students, there's been an over-reliance to some degree, both graduate as well as undergraduate students, because of a lack of resources from the state of California. Obviously, because they pay full freight when they come to California. So if you're part of the princeling generation, if you will, let's say, for example, from China, who will pay cash, obviously, and have the funds to come here and buy everything, these funds, the real estate funds, cash, you have a lot of money. And that money is very attractive to the University of California to keep it afloat, given the lack or the cutbacks from the state of California. I think we have to double down and recommit ourselves to investing in the University of California system, which is absolutely critical for innovation, for technology, for entrepreneurship, for our economy in California. And we're going to do that. We're going to demonstrate that concretely in this year's budget, while there will be a substantial increase in the University of California system. It may not be perhaps exactly what Janet Napolitano wants, and I can understand that, but when you look at the pie, there's so much that you can do given the pie. And Julie talked about the issue of taxes, and I won't go into the competitiveness, because we can be here for a couple more sessions about that. But we have a tax system in California that's very volatile. Obviously, we rely on personal income tax and capital gains tax, roughly about 60–65%. So if wealthy folks do well with capital gains, then we do well. If they don't do well, especially in a globalized economy now, we don't do well. And we have to have some very serious tax structure reform dialogues and conversations that put everything on the table. Either we're going to continue to rely on the wealthiest of Californians through personal income tax, which will sunset Prop 30 in 2019, or sales tax, which is a regressive tax by far and large. We're going to deal with taxes on services, taxes on goods. So we're going to do with an oil severance tax to tax or not tax. You know, that's the question we have to have, because the one thing that we need is we need less volatility and we need more stability and continuity so we can make the strategic investments without the fear of what's happening in Greece, what's happened with capitalization or lack thereof in Iceland, in Ireland, and in Spain, and with the Germans, you know, giving cash out to everyone like there's no tomorrow. That had an impact on the state of California, and it had an impact on us most severely, again, because of our over-reliance with regards to the housing stock, and that had a profound impact, obviously, on education, especially higher education, and the competitiveness, you know. So we're going to invest more money in education in California, $4 billion K through 12, but higher education, we're going to invest about $300 million in addition to. The last thing I want to say is the foreign students, you're absolutely right. What we do here, because of the dysfunctional immigration system that's quite schizophrenic in Washington, D.C., as soon as we educate you, albeit with your own dollars, we say, go back home. So they become entrepreneurs, and Bangalore becomes the new Silicon Valley, and other parts of China and elsewhere in other parts of India. We got to say, you stay here. And precision medicine, for example. If we have the top 20 life sciences universities, Cambridge, Harvard, University of Sydney, University of Toronto, and if they find a cure for cancer or Alzheimer's, I'd be highly disappointed given the fact that we have UCLA, UCSD, Stanford, Caltech, as well as Cal. We can keep these graduate students here so they can be Californians and invest in California, therefore give more money to the general fund, and everyone prospers across the board.
I want to add one thing too, is that while many of the students, come to universities here, especially in California, the foreign students, many of them went back and become very successful business owners, and many of them came from wealthy family. I think that we also can do a better job, to get them back, not necessarily living here, but many of them have very fond memories of California, especially. It's really, such a not just a good place to study, but it's a fun place to live. So many of them actually come back and forth, even though they don't live here. So if we can also connect them back and contribute back to our economy here, that can also make a big difference, and also making us to be more globally connected.
Now, Sylvia, since you're in a position to actually retain people, since you're facilitating entrepreneurs,
yes.
What do you do when you have somebody who's coming out of these university systems? Do you connect directly with them, or do you connect with them after a little bit of work experience, or how does that work in terms of bringing people in?
Are you talking about the entrepreneurs that are applying to our program?
Yes.
Yes. Well, they applied through our online application. Last year we had about over 80 applicants, 70% from the U.S., 30% from Latin America. And we go through an extensive interview process. We have a selection committee that reviews all of their innovation, creations, and ideas. And then we select about 7 to 10 companies. Last year, if you could go to slide number 10, we had 7 companies in our cohort. We had 2 companies from Mexico City. The rest were from the U.S. and great technologies. I was just blown away. And so what we do is we have some great people with us there, and believe it or not, some of them don't want to leave. We have 2 companies. One is from Mexico City, who is staying in our office and setting up shop here, and we're just going through the visa type of experience that Deep was just talking about. Oh my gosh! And I'm from. My parents are from Mexico, and I just couldn't believe all the stuff he has to go through just to stay in Silicon Valley and set up shop there. All the other companies went back to their states. Some of them stayed in San Jose, and they're coming back and forth. But yeah, I mean, they really love being there, and we're attracting more companies from Latin America who want to come and set up shop. And the bad thing is the visa issue that we're facing with.
But what's the average age of somebody who applies?
I think the average age was like in their late 20s, early 30s.
So they've come out of college, they've been here just long enough that they know they really want to be it, or in some cases they're coming from Latin America.
Yes.
That they've managed to figure out they want to be here.
Exactly.
So there's a certain window of opportunity. Now, Joe, one other thing just to go back on it is that when we're trying to attract and keep people, is there sort of a window where people are particularly motivated to want to come here and take a risk and move to the U.S., and does that go away after a while, do you think?
Well, I mean, certainly I think you see a lot of people, coming here for school, coming here, when some event happens in their country. I mean, I think you see people certainly of all ages and in all situations coming here. And I think, look, I mean, the rest of the world is doing better and better over time, which is a really good thing. You've had roughly net even flow to Mexico and from Mexico as the Mexican economy has become stronger and stronger, which is a great thing for Mexico. So, it's not always going to be the case that the most talented people in the world are want to come here, so we should keep attracting them while we can. I wanted to say, I know we're right at time, I just wanted to say just a little bit about the politics of immigration reform at the moment, because I do think it's important that people understand that, our view is that over the next 100 days or so, we have a pretty significant opportunity. It's a very difficult one, but a possibility to get legislation moving. As folks may know, there's a bill that passed the U.S. Senate last year. It was not perfect, but a very groundbreaking, important bill that dealt with many of the hardest problems. We now have a variety of pieces of legislation at various stages in the House. You've had John Boehner say repeatedly that he would like to move immigration reform. I think that, for the people in this room, many of whom are very influential in the business community, especially here in California, it is really important that members of Congress, frankly, at this point, especially Republican members of Congress, use some very critical ones here in California, Kevin McCarthy, Buck McKeon, who need to hear from their local business communities, need to hear from Californians that this is critical to our economy, that there are hundreds of thousands of jobs, people's lives every day that are being impacted by this. And I think we have over the next few months a possibility to get some legislation moving and build on the groundbreaking work of the Senate. And it's been 1986 was the last big immigration overhaul. We don't want it to be another 30 years. So it is really important that this issue, which maybe often isn't the sexiest or isn't the number one on people's minds, that for people to understand that there is a real moment of opportunity.
When you talk about university students, one thing to remember is that even though we are bringing them in and they're paying full freight, the cost of educating them is actually a lot higher than the tuition that they pay. Because you cannot equate a world-renowned economist teaching them, a world-renowned computer scientist teaching them, a world-renowned biologist teaching them, and spending multiple hours with them. If they are consulting, they are making tens of thousands of dollars an hour. The same professor is spending that time with them, and they are accessing all these facilities. There's no way a tuition of 30, 40, 50,000 even a year can compensate for the opportunity cost of those professors. So now we are actually in the deficit. Yeah. We are bringing really bright people in, we are educating them, that's phenomenal for humanity, but then we are turning them away. And we have to think of it as the holistic cost of not having them here, both from the standpoint of the investment we've made and the future opportunity that we are losing. And that together is a very compelling argument for anyone who can do just basic math. Should be anyway.
So Julie, do you have something to follow up on that?
No, I totally agree. I think that it is a loss, the opportunity cost, for us to not, retain the brightest talents, especially for those students that come all the way to United States attending the best universities here, so, yeah.
Kevin?
Let me just say, I agree 100% because obviously in the University of California system, when you have Nobel Prize winners in economy, nuclear engineering, and so forth, you're being taught from the very best. And so we start off, we end up in a deficit, in many ways with the brain drain and a budgetary deficit, given the fact that we've invested so much more just to lose those individuals to go back home and become entrepreneurs, and the lack of capital that returns back to California for investments in California. But I want to add something to what Joe said, because I want to add my plug too. I can't say enough how critical immigration reform is, and obviously we'll have some very powerful individuals here, Eric Cantor and Kevin McCarthy. I think Kevin McCarthy is very key. I think Boehner wants this to happen. Obviously, it's very difficult for him to control his own house, given the fact there's such an ideological rigidness within the House of Representatives. But I think Kevin McCarthy is actually key if this is going to come to fruition, given the fact that you have other folks who follow him. He has a little more credibility than the actual leader himself of the House of Representatives. So that is key. In fact, we're going to do this because this is a nation state. This is not Mississippi or Louisiana. And because of the rigid seniority system of the Congress, that you can be 40, 30 years and become chair of a committee and from a small town in Mississippi with such gargantuan global impacts, especially for the economic security of this nation as a whole, not just California, but as California goes, the entire nation goes. It's just that simple, for better or for worse. That it is almost quirky and comical sometimes to see the debate in Washington, D.C. when it comes to H-1B visas or when it comes to just uniting families together, regardless of your income level, to see this happen and have such a profound impact. I was in Beijing when they had the debt ceiling debate, and it was very surreal to see the press releases from the Chinese government lecturing the U.S. government to get its act together, and to be in Beijing, actually in my hotel room, and to be meeting with several ministers of government, and their sort of smug sort of attitude, and it's like, you need to get your act together. And you had folks in D.C. who are willing to take the country to the cliff, not to the cliff, but beyond the cliff, to cut their nose just to spite themselves. That you have such an ideological rigidity that it is a threat, I believe, to the economic security of this country. And I'll be very clear about that because I know what it means for California.
And we're running out of time, so to say is that but what it comes back to is that California really is a reflection on the country of the country, and it's a reflection on the world, and our ability to not only from a legal standpoint to expand our diversity, but also to take advantage of it from a business climate standpoint, to take advantage from an educational standpoint, to take advantage of it from an entrepreneurial standpoint, from a communication and connection standpoint, is really essential. And I would like to thank all of our panelists for being able to illustrate that today, and for all of you for attending. And